Something incredible happened beneath the vast plains of Texas and the windswept fields of North Dakota. It was a revolution, but not one of politics or ideology. It was a revolution of rock and oil, powered by a technology called hydraulic fracturing, or fracking. Suddenly, America, a nation long defined by its thirst for foreign oil, found itself sitting on an ocean of it. By 2024, the United States was pumping out a staggering 13.6 million barrels of crude oil every single day. Think about that number for a moment. It's more than any other country on Earth. It has fundamentally rewired the global energy map, turning the U.S. into the world's undisputed energy superpower. This wasn't just a minor uptick in production, it was a seismic shift. For decades, Americans worried about their reliance on far-off nations for the fuel that powered their cars and heated their homes. Now, the story has flipped. The U.S. doesn't just produce enough energy for itself, it exports it. In 2024, the country exported a record 30.9 quadrillion BTUs of energy, a figure that is hard to even comprehend. This newfound abundance, driven largely by shale oil from places like the Permian Basin in Texas, has given America a powerful new tool on the world stage. It has changed everything from gas prices at the pump to high-stakes international diplomacy. The heart of this boom is shale oil, also known as tight oil. It accounts for more than 2/3 of all U.S. production. It's oil that was once considered unreachable, trapped in tight rock formations deep underground. Fracking changed that, using high-pressure water, sand, and chemicals to break the rock apart and release the oil. The result is a flood of crude oil and natural gas liquids that has propelled the U.S. to the top of the production charts since 2014. This isn't just an economic story. It's a story about power, independence, and the immense, often hidden consequences of unlocking this buried treasure. But what does it truly mean to be an energy superpower built on shale? It means a new kind of confidence, a buffer against global supply shocks that once sent the American economy into a tailspin. Yet it also means we are tied to a process that is controversial, resource-intensive, and carries a heavy environmental price tag. The shale revolution has brought jobs, wealth, and geopolitical leverage. But it has also brought profound questions about our planet's future. Is this surge in production a blessing that secures our prosperity? Or is it a curse that accelerates our environmental decline? This is the central urgent question of our time. The shale boom didn't just unleash oil, it unleashed a torrent of environmental consequences. At the top of the list is its contribution to climate change. Extracting oil from shale is a more carbon-intensive process than drilling for conventional oil. Some estimates suggest it can release up to 50% more CO2 into the atmosphere when all factors, from drilling to processing, are considered. This is a troubling reality. At a time when the world is desperately trying to cut emissions to avoid the worst impacts of a warming planet, America's energy miracle is actively adding more fuel to the fire. It's a paradox at the heart of our energy policy. Then there is the air we breathe. In the communities surrounding these vast drilling operations, the air is often thick with pollutants. The process releases a cocktail of harmful substances, including nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxide, and fine particulate matter. These aren't just abstract chemical names, they are direct threats to human health. Residents in places like the Permian Basin and North Dakota's Bakken Shale region report higher rates of asthma and other respiratory illnesses. The very air that should sustain life becomes a source of sickness, a hidden cost paid by the people living closest to the boom. It's an invisible toll that builds up day after day. Beyond the well pad, the impact spreads. The widespread switch from coal to natural gas, another product of the fracking boom, did lead to a significant drop in U.S. carbon emissions over the past decade. This was hailed as a climate victory, but it's a complicated win. The victory is clouded by the persistent problem of methane leaks. Methane is a greenhouse gas far more potent than carbon dioxide in the short term. It escapes from pipelines, storage tanks, and wellheads, silently undermining the climate benefits of moving away from coal. The shale revolution gave us a cleaner burning fuel, but it also gave us a new, insidious source of planetary warming. So, the environmental ledger for shale is deeply unbalanced. On one side, you have the perceived benefit of a cleaner fuel than coal, but on the other, you have higher carbon emissions from the extraction process itself, toxic air pollution endangering local communities, and the pervasive threat of methane. This isn't a simple story of good versus bad. It's a complex, messy reality where progress in one area creates new problems in another. We are making a trade-off, but it's becoming increasingly clear that the long-term bill for our energy abundance could be devastatingly high for the planet. The shale revolution is incredibly thirsty. Hydraulic fracturing requires immense volumes of water, a fact that is often overlooked in the celebration of energy independence. To extract just 1 liter of oil from shale rock, it can take up to 1.2 liters of water. When you scale that up across millions of barrels a day, the numbers become astronomical. In arid and semi-arid regions like West Texas and eastern Colorado, where much of this drilling occurs, this intensive water use puts an enormous strain on already scarce resources. Water that is vital for cities, farms, and ecosystems is being diverted to fuel the oil boom. Consider the Colorado River, the lifeblood of the American Southwest. It provides water for over 30 million people and irrigates vast stretches of farmland. Yet it is also a source of water for fracking operations in the region. The river is already over-allocated and shrinking due to a historic climate change-fueled drought. Every gallon pumped out of the ground for fracking is a gallon that doesn't flow downstream to cities like Las Vegas and Los Angeles or to the farms that feed the nation. At its peak, some projections warned that full-scale shale development in the basin could consume enough water to drain Lake Mead, the nation's largest reservoir, in less than a decade. It's not just about the quantity of water used, it's also about the quality. The water used in fracking is mixed with sand and a proprietary blend of chemicals, many of which are toxic. This chemical cocktail is injected deep underground to fracture the rock. While the industry maintains that the process is safe, there are documented risks of these chemicals contaminating groundwater aquifers, the very sources of drinking water for many rural communities. Furthermore, the wastewater that flows back to the surface is a toxic brine that must be carefully managed. Spills, leaks, and improper disposal can lead to long-term soil and water contamination, leaving a poisonous legacy long after the oil wells run dry. This creates a painful dilemma for communities in shale regions. They are caught between the promise of economic prosperity and the threat to their most essential resource, water. The water wars of the American West are not a thing of the past. They are being reignited and intensified by the insatiable thirst of the shale industry. For farmers watching their wells run dry, for cities facing water restrictions, and for anyone who depends on rivers like the Colorado, the shale boom feels less like a miracle and more like a looming catastrophe. The question becomes unavoidable. Can we afford to sacrifice our water security for energy security? The shale revolution has redrawn more than just the energy map. It has redrawn the very landscape of America. What were once vast, uninterrupted stretches of prairie, forest, and desert are now fragmented by a sprawling web of well pads, access roads, pipelines, and processing facilities. This relentless habitat destruction is pushing countless species of wildlife to the brink. The noise, the lights, and the constant human activity disrupt migration patterns, breeding cycles, and the delicate balance of entire ecosystems. For the animals who call these places home, the oil boom is an invasion that leaves them with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. In the fragile ecosystems of the American West, the consequences are starkly visible. The Colorado River Basin, a hotspot for both shale development and biodiversity, is home to several endangered fish species, including the Colorado pike minnow and the razorback sucker. These fish are uniquely adapted to the river's historical flow, but their survival is now threatened by the twin pressures of water diversion for fracking and the potential for chemical contamination from spills. Similarly, the Mexican spotted owl, which nests in the canyons of the region, finds its quiet habitat shattered by the round-the-clock clamor of drilling operations, threatening its ability to hunt and raise its young. The impact goes beyond just the big charismatic species. The entire food web is being destabilized. The toxic chemicals used in fracking can seep into the soil and water, working their way up the food chain. Small organisms absorb the toxins, which are then passed on to the fish, birds, and mammals that eat them. This process, known as bioaccumulation, can lead to reproductive failure, genetic mutations, and widespread disease in wildlife populations. It's a slow, silent poison that unravels the intricate tapestry of life from the inside out, creating a cascade of ecological problems that may not be fully understood for generations. This is the hidden tragedy of the shale boom. While we celebrate lower gas prices and energy independence, a quiet war is being waged against the natural world. The vast industrial footprint of fracking is fundamentally altering what it means to be wild in America. The sage-grouse of Wyoming, the pronghorn of the plains, and the delicate aquatic life of our rivers are all on the front lines, their survival hanging in the balance. We are transforming their homes into sacrifice zones for our energy consumption, and in doing so, we risk losing a part of our natural heritage that can never be replaced. When the oil industry comes to town, it brings a tidal wave of change. Small, quiet communities in places like West Texas or rural Pennsylvania can transform overnight into bustling boom towns. The promise is, well, honestly pretty intoxicating. High-paying jobs, overflowing tax coffers, and a sudden rush of prosperity. New hotels, restaurants, and businesses spring up to serve the influx of workers. For a time, it really feels like a modern-day gold rush. But this boom is built on a fragile foundation, the volatile price of oil. When prices are high, life is good. But when they crash, the dream can quickly turn into a nightmare. This boom and bust cycle creates a brutal form of economic whiplash. During a boom, local infrastructure is pushed to its breaking point. Schools become overcrowded, roads crumble under the weight of heavy truck traffic, and housing prices skyrocket, pushing out longtime residents. Local governments struggle to keep up with the demand for services, often before the promised tax revenues even arrive. Then, when global oil prices plummet, as they did in 2025 when they fell to around $61 a barrel, the industry pulls back just as quickly as it arrived. The high-paying jobs vanish, businesses close their doors, and the once thriving boom towns are haunted by the specter of economic collapse. The social fabric of these communities is often torn apart in the process. The rapid influx of a largely transient male workforce can lead to increased crime rates, substance abuse, and a strain on social services. Lifelong neighbors find themselves on opposite sides of the debate, pitting those who lease their land for drilling against those who worry about the environmental and health impacts. The sense of community, built over generations, can erode under the pressure. When the bust inevitably comes, it leaves behind not just economic devastation, but also deep social scars and a profound sense of abandonment. This is the human cost of our reliance on shale oil. Behind the impressive production numbers and geopolitical strategies are real people and real communities riding a violent economic roller coaster. They are offered a taste of incredible wealth, only to have it snatched away, leaving them to pick up the pieces. The cycle creates deep inequality, benefiting distant corporations and shareholders, while leaving local populations to bear the long-term risks of environmental degradation and social disruption. For these communities, the shale revolution is not a story of sustained prosperity, but a recurring cycle of hope and despair. The American shale revolution didn't just disrupt communities, it disrupted the entire global order of oil. For decades, the world's energy markets were dominated by a powerful cartel, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, and its allies like Russia, collectively known as OPEC+. They controlled the spigots, and by turning them on or off, they could dictate the price of oil worldwide. Nations rose and fell based on their decisions. But the flood of American shale oil changed the game completely. Suddenly, there was a new giant in the room, one that didn't play by the cartel's rules. This new reality has severely eroded OPEC+'s market power. The cartel's share of the global oil market has shrunk significantly over the last decade, and its ability to prop up prices has been undermined. Every time OPEC+ has tried to cut production to boost prices, American shale producers, with their nimble and fast-moving operations, have stepped in to fill the gap. This has created a constant tug-of-war. In a bold move to reclaim market share, OPEC+ began unwinding its production cuts in 2024, a decision that sent oil prices tumbling. This was a direct shot at U.S. shale, which is highly sensitive to price fluctuations. The strategy has had a real impact. With oil prices hovering around $61 a barrel in early 2025, many U.S. shale wells became unprofitable. The U.S. rig count fell to its lowest level since 2021, and drilling activity slowed. This demonstrates the precarious nature of the shale industry. While it can ramp up quickly, it can also be forced to scale back just as fast. The industry has become more disciplined and efficient, with larger companies buying up smaller players, but the fundamental vulnerability to low prices remains. the U.S. has become a swing producer, a role that brings both influence and instability. This ongoing battle for market dominance has massive implications for the global economy. For oil-importing countries, lower prices are a welcome relief. But for the nations whose budgets depend heavily on oil revenue, like Saudi Arabia or Nigeria, it can be devastating, leading to social unrest and political instability. The rise of U.S. shale has introduced a new era of volatility into the market. The old certainties are gone, replaced by a complex and unpredictable power struggle between a state-led cartel and a decentralized, market-driven industry. The world is still learning to navigate this new, uncertain energy landscape. One of the most celebrated triumphs of the shale revolution is American energy independence. The idea that the U.S. is no longer beholden to volatile, often hostile regions of the world for its energy supply has been a powerful political narrative. For decades, the fear of an oil embargo or a blockade in a critical choke point like the Strait of Hormuz held sway over American foreign policy. The shale boom, in theory, has provided a shield against these threats. When Iran threatened to close the strait in June 2025 amid rising tensions, the panic that would have once gripped Washington was noticeably muted. America, it seemed, was insulated. This newfound insulation has reshaped U.S. foreign policy. The country is less economically vulnerable to conflicts in the Middle East, giving it more flexibility in its diplomatic and military engagements. It no longer has to tailor its foreign policy decisions solely around securing the flow of oil. This has shifted the global balance of power. Countries like China, which remain heavily dependent on Middle Eastern oil, are now far more exposed to supply disruptions than the United States. This gives the U.S. a significant strategic advantage in its geopolitical competition with other world powers. However, this sense of security may be a dangerous illusion. While the U.S. is a net exporter of energy, the oil market is global. A major disruption anywhere in the world will still cause prices to spike everywhere, including at the American gas pump. The U.S. economy is not an island. It is deeply integrated into the global financial system, which would be thrown into chaos by a severe oil shock. Furthermore, our key allies in Europe and Asia remain highly dependent on imported energy, meaning a crisis in the Middle East would still be a crisis for American strategic interests. True energy security is more than just domestic production. It's about global market stability. Moreover, our reliance on shale creates its own set of vulnerabilities. The industry's boom-bust nature makes our domestic supply less stable than the steady production of conventional oil fields. A prolonged period of low prices could decimate the U.S. shale industry, forcing the country to become a major importer once again, and leaving it exposed to the very risks it sought to escape. The geopolitical shield provided by shale is real, but it is not impenetrable. It has bought America time and flexibility, but it has not solved the fundamental problem of a world economy addicted to a volatile and finite resource. Perhaps the most profound and long-lasting consequence of the shale boom is the one we talk about the least: its impact on our transition to a sustainable future. The flood of cheap and abundant natural gas and oil has created a powerful sense of complacency. It has made the urgent task of moving to renewable energy sources like wind and solar seem less pressing. Why invest trillions in a new energy system when the old one is working so well, delivering cheap fuel and geopolitical power? This logic, while tempting, is a dangerous trap. It locks us into a fossil fuel-dependent future at the very moment science tells us we must break free. Every dollar invested in a new fracking well is a dollar not invested in a solar farm or a wind turbine. Every new pipeline built commits us to decades more of carbon emissions. The shale revolution has created a massive economic and political infrastructure that is deeply resistant to change. Powerful lobbying groups, entire state economies, and millions of jobs are now tied to the continued extraction of fossil fuels. This creates a formidable barrier to the kind of bold, systemic change needed to address the climate crisis. We have, in effect, doubled down on the past, just as we need to be sprinting toward the future. This dependency carries immense risks. Shale oil wells deplete much faster than conventional wells, meaning we have to keep drilling more and more just to maintain current production levels. It is a frantic race on a resource treadmill. Projections show that U.S. shale production will likely peak around 2027 and then begin a long, steady decline. If we have not used this window of energy abundance to build a sustainable alternative, we will find ourselves in a perilous position. Our domestic fossil fuel production will be falling, and we will have failed to build the renewable infrastructure to replace it, leaving us once again dependent on foreign imports and vulnerable to price shocks. We are at a critical crossroads. The shale boom has given us a temporary energy advantage, a brief window of opportunity. We can use this time to accelerate our transition to a clean energy economy, leveraging the wealth generated by shale to fund the innovation and infrastructure of tomorrow. Or we can continue down the current path, enjoying the short-term benefits while ignoring the long-term consequences. This choice will define our legacy. Continuing our dependency on shale is not a strategy for security. It is a delay tactic that makes the inevitable transition more difficult and the consequences of our inaction more severe. The story of U.S. shale is a story of immense power and profound contradictions. It is a boon that has delivered economic growth, jobs, and a new level of geopolitical influence. But it is also a bane that has inflicted deep scars on our environment, strained our precious water resources, and destabilized communities. We cannot simply label it as good or bad. We must confront its complex reality and make difficult choices about the path forward. Ignoring the problems will not make them go away. It will only ensure that our children and grandchildren inherit a planet that is hotter, more polluted, and less stable. A sustainable path requires a two-pronged approach. First, we must acknowledge that fossil fuels will remain part of our energy mix for some time, and we must rigorously regulate the shale industry to minimize its harm. This means enforcing strict rules on methane emissions, demanding full transparency on the chemicals used in fracking, and implementing robust protections for water resources. It means ensuring that energy companies, not taxpayers, are responsible for the full cost of cleanup and environmental restoration. We must hold the industry to the highest possible standard, moving beyond the patchwork of state-level regulations to a more coherent and protective national framework. Second, and most critically, we must use this period of energy abundance as a bridge to a truly clean and sustainable future. This is not a distant dream, it is an urgent necessity. It requires a massive national-level commitment to investing in renewable energy sources like solar, wind, and green hydrogen. It means modernizing our electrical grid to handle these new sources of power and promoting energy efficiency to reduce our overall demand. This transition will not only combat climate change, but will also create millions of new, lasting jobs and position the United States as the global leader in the technologies of the 21st century. Ultimately, the choice is ours. We can continue to ride the volatile wave of the shale boom, extracting every last drop of oil while pushing our planet closer to the edge. Or we can choose a different path. We can harness the innovative spirit that unlocked the shale revolution and redirect it toward building a future that is both prosperous and sustainable. This will require courage, foresight, and a willingness to prioritize the long-term health of our planet and our communities over the short-term profits of an extractive industry. The future of our energy, our economy, and our world depends on the choice we make today.